Evening, one and all, and welcome to what is the, penultimate Wednesday stream before Christmas. But again, we're going to be talking about just what is going on in the Tory party, because at the moment, this is easily the most fascinating, interesting time of the Tory party we've ever seen in probably most recent history. And even if you thought a couple of years ago, like between 2017 to 2019, if you thought the Tory party was crazy then, or doing insane, ludicrous things, well, ladies and gentlemen, strap yourselves in, because 2022 is literally just around the corner, and someone is literally waiting to dethrone Boris. And we are going to be getting into one of the candidates this evening about that and how she could very well be replacing Boris Johnson. But before we do get into that, let's welcome everyone in the chat then, shall we? So, Colin, greetings from New York. Yes, we are hoping for a very lucky, hopeful Christmas this year. Hollander, ahoy to you. Cathal, evening to you. Leah Games, evening to you. Morgan Green 19, good evening from the Netherlands. Quatsa, that's how you say it. Good evening to you. FSM the dog, good evening to you. FSM, can't they just arrange a few duels to just sort it all out? If only it was that easy. My word. Because I think we're going to be discussing Liz Truss at length probably this evening, I think it only fair just to briefly mention Rishi Sunak, because I've got a video coming out tomorrow all about Rishi Sunak and what he has been up to. And let me tell you now, Rishi Sunak has not been a very good boy recently. He has not been a very good boy at all. Indeed, he's been a rather naughty one. And if I was Santa Claus, he'd absolutely be on the naughty list this Christmas. Because Rishi Sunak has been undermining and underfunding all of Boris Johnson's key policy proposals. Why would, again, a guy who was elevated to his position by Boris Johnson be so aggravated by this and literally undermining the very man who put him into power? Well, it's quite simple. He wants Boris Johnson's job. Now, Liz Truss, don't worry, we'll be getting to her in a moment, at the moment is on a probably marketing offensive campaign. At the moment, she is marketing herself as the next Tory leader, but at the moment, she hasn't actually got anything to offer. However, Rishi Sunak, on the other hand, is out there throwing out all his financial and ministerial cred, doing all these things. He got that massive bump, of course, popularity during the pandemic with the furlough scheme. And now he is trying to push forward even more the idea that he is the successor to Margaret Thatcher. He is the low-tax, small-state prime minister that the Tories have been craving. So he is definitely out there, and he's putting himself out there as that alternative. So as time goes on, if you really want to pay attention to what is going to go on in the Tory party in probably the next couple of months, almost certainly, then the people to watch are Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak. But however, just before we go and jump into, shall we say, the other problems that are that the Tory party have got, because oh my, problems do they have. Let's just say to the people that have joined us since then, Horton 125, evening all. Another strong and stable week in the UK politics. Indeed, what a week it's been. Get, evening to you. Daily Blaze, good evening to you. Merry Christmas. Yes, Pedals, yes. Please do remember to smash that like and share button, please. Like I say, it'll help get more people in. Like I say, the more people in the chat, the better, to be honest. And of course, Evening Ford, good evening to you. So, let's jump on with the show then, shall we? So, I have mentioned before that even after the 2019 general election, just because the Tories had won such a massive majority, it wasn't an overwhelmingly, shall we say, a good thing for them. Because the Tories are people who want to be rewarded for their, shall we say, actions and getting into essentially politics. And the thing is, with such a massive majority like that, there are only so many ministerial seats. There's only so many committees that Boris Johnson can give out to, shall we say, his loyalists. And at the moment, what happens is that they start plotting. And one of the other big problems that we've really seen even more now that Boris Johnson has come to power was the fact that you've not only just got the ERG, or the European Research Group, now active, also known infamously as the party within the party, you've now got the Northern Research Group, you've got the COVID Recovery Group, you've got the Culture and something Restoration group that they're called. There is a group of free market fundamentalist libertarians in there, sprinkled in there as well, within the many different groups. They have fractured so badly, not only just along ideological lines, but factional lines as well. And this is not going to end well. Because now, whoever becomes the next prime minister will be carried forward on a very simple mandate. You've got to keep at least a certain majority of the party on your side, or else they'll get rid of you. You may have seen just this week, Nadine Dorries, well, actually last weekend indeed, Nadine Dorries booted out of the ERG WhatsApp group for saying that the members in that group should probably show a little loyalty to Boris Johnson. I mean, if saying showing loyalty to your leader gets you kicked out of a group, which, by the way, cancel culture alerts, something I think Nadine Dorries should be very worried about, that she got cancelled by a group of fellow conservatives. Again, rather quite funny. But to say that, and also saying for the fact that the Tory party in its DNA now has a very serious regicidal gene now embedded in it. Basically saying, if you don't like the leader, or you don't like the direction of travel, you can now legitimately oust your leader. This is not going to end well, not only for Boris Johnson, but for any future leader of the Tory party. Their only option is to essentially have a massive purge. But the likelihood of that happening is, well, slim at this moment in time. And there is certainly no leader waiting in the wings to swoop in who is willing to, shall we say, do the purge. But this will open up to some huge Tory party civil war across everything. Ideology, factions, regional lines, you name it. The Tory party is primed and ready to go to war, not against Labour, not against the Lib Dems, or not against any other potential vote-stealing successor to UKIP. They are primed to go to war against themselves. This is a party that is literally ready to tear itself to shreds. And oh my, if you thought the Nadine Dorries thing was funny and it was a bit of like, blue on blue fire, you haven't seen blue on blue fire yet. Because trust me, when it comes, and it will come, the Tory party is going to internally tear itself to shreds. So, anyway, let's get on to this article from the Yorkshire Bylines, because they've got it spot on here. The Tory party itself does have more to worry about than Johnson's personal flaws, because there's a lot going on just in the next couple of weeks after Christmas and after the New Year. They're going to be very, very crucial to not only to see who, shall we say, becomes the heir apparent to Boris Johnson, but also probably the future of the Tory party itself as a direction. So let's jump into this from the Yorkshire Bylines. So the Tory party has more to worry about than Johnson's personal flaws. So as 2021 now edges to a close, the blank pantomime in Downing Street under Boris Johnson is reaching farcical levels. Daily revelations about Christmas parties come interspersed with news of the search for someone to head up and the investigation who didn't actually attend one of the legal gatherings themselves. Finally, Johnson's closest ally, Lord Flost, playing the villain, exit stage left, accompanied by the sounds of hissing and brewing from Brussels. So Johnson is now finished. The Prime Minister is by common consent finished. Only the moment of his going now remains to be set. This piece by the Financial Times contributing editor Phil Stevens was a terrific read and explains how unsuited Johnson is to be PM and why his premiership was always destined to be very short-lived. Johnson has always been unfit for high political office, as incompetent as he is dishonest. Beyond Brexit, that exercise in self-harm set to make the UK at once poor, less secure in its own union of nations, and weaker abroad, he has absolutely nothing to say. However, if the Conservative Party think ejecting him will solve any problems, a very salutary lesson now awaits them. Once often described as the most successful political party in the world. That's quite insane, that. I mean, for all the Tory party problems, that is actually quite true. They are one of the most successful political parties in the world. There is no denying that. I mean, they've been, like I say, they've had more time in power in the last 100 years than any other political party. I think they're technically one of the longest running parties in the world. Not only history length, but voting wise as well, they've managed to survive. But I have to ask that self the same question: what is coming here? This upcoming Tory party civil war. It's going to be insane. I tell you that now. There's going to be lots of mudslinging, lots of probably more allegations will probably miraculously appear. But as I've said before, the two main contenders, and again, this has shifted and changes as we've gone along, but again, the two main contenders, first of all, out by a country mile by being the most popular member of the Conservative Party at this moment in time, is Liz Truss. And don't worry, we're going to get into Liz Truss in a bit. And obviously second, but not by much, though, is Rishi Sunak. And I think Rishi Sunak's chances also really depend on how the pandemic recovery goes, as well as how his help has been seen in helping. Most recently, he announced a big bailout package for the hospitality sector. How that goes and how that goes over with them will ultimately, I think, depend on his premiership. Like I say, he's juggling a lot of balls, is Rishi at the moment, and they could all come crashing down very quickly on him. But as they say, you never know what's going to happen in politics. We'll have to see how it all goes. Please do not get into Liz. That sounds disgusting. Don't worry, we're going to be we're going to be diving in there later. Don't worry, kid. Oh dear. Anyway, back to this. So often described as the most successful political party in the world, the Tories' most recent spell of 4 election wins on the trot has been achieved by absorbing UKIP, a far-right nationalist party, and then choosing another amoral populist leader in order to try and isolate Britain from the EU, a policy to which they remain deeply committed. There is also a sign of party members recognising that Brexit, on which Johnson's departure will have accounted for an early demise of the last 3 Tory leaders and will probably lead to the regicide of the next, is the root of the problem. It is a policy that is already doing irreparable economic damage and will almost certainly lead to the destruction of the United Kingdom. Indeed, getting rid of Johnson will not change that. Regardless of who's followed and who's purged of the moderate voices, the party is now bound to remain in the very headlock of the ERG. So, the North Shropshire by-election, again, almost certainly is what is being massively talked about, probably in Tory circles very recently. How did we lose this? They may be asking. And I've got an article lined up later, which again will be getting into that. But the Tories are very much worried about an orange wave hitting them. So what an orange wave is, as we talk about, if you don't know what that is, essentially it is a load of Conservative voters now changing their votes over to the Liberal Democrats. So, and that's what happened in North Shropshire. And we're still waiting for, well, what's the best way to describe it? We're still waiting for like the final play-by-play of what happened. However, one of the things that the article that we'll get into later in the stream does bring up was the fact that farmers feel betrayed by Brexit. They're one of the groups that, again, like many instances, everyone says, oh, farmers voted overwhelmingly for Brexit. No, they didn't. They didn't vote overwhelmingly for Brexit. Like everyone else in the country, they were very much split down the middle. So some did, some didn't. But overwhelmingly, the Brexit trade deal is being seen as well being destroyed from Twitch. We need an authoritarian version of the Republican Party. Probably not at the moment, but again, British politics is like the current, shall we say, animal, especially like the Conservative Party here in the UK. They are showing a very strong libertarian authoritarian streak at the moment, is the party. That's undeniable, especially with like the crime and policing bills, the sentencing courts bill as well. Dominic Raab's basically attempt to go and rip up the human rights bill. There's so much going on that you could just show that he's just playing to their bent. But in the same version of the Republican Party, no. The stuff that Republican parties does over in America won't work over here, purely for the fact that a lot of the Republican Party is heavily based into the, shall we say, the right-wing religious element that is a prominent faction in America still, but doesn't exist here. You'll hear many conservatives talk about their religion, but it's not something they like to, shall we say, shout about to the extent that the Republicans do over there, which again wins them votes in America, but people don't care what your religion is over here when they vote for you. So anyway, let's continue to this, because the North Shropshire by-election was a massive shock to the system for the Conservative Party. So the Conservatives took a real shellacking at the North Shropshire from the Liberal Democrats, but it can hardly have come as a surprise. Voter revulsion has been building ever since Johnson stepped in to try and save the corrupt former MP Owen Paterson back on the 3rd of November. The political commentators now compete with each other in seeking to try and explain this result. They are all spoilt for choice. The Prime Minister has previously has provided plenty of reasons for former Tory voters for justifying staying at home or even switching allegiance. Whether his perennially dishevelled appearance or vaulting hypocrisy, the lack of moral standards, or the general air of ineptitude, corruption, and incompetence hanging over his administration, or like a black cloud, or it was just something that for everyone. But Johnson's personal failings, however egregious, do not tell the full story. What was very noticeable in Shropshire was how little gratitude there was for a Prime Minister credited with getting Brexit done. In a constituency that voted to leave the EU by nearly 60%, his oft-used get-out-of-jail-free card has now expired. During the campaign, the Guido Fawkes website, run by White Ring blogger Paul Steins, revealed that the Lib Dems candidate Helen Morgan had been an enthusiastic campaigner for Remain since 2016. But it made no difference, for she had completely overturned Patterson's 23,000 majority to win comfortably. The BBC ran a report about the rural constituency on the border with Wales, and the complaints were mainly about local issues. The closing of police stations, of doctors' surgeries, or the lack of bus and ambulance services, all related to the cuts in government funding. In 2016, Patterson had told farmers in the largely agricultural area that Brexit would mean more money for them. Instead, they've gotten a very hideously complicated green policy that will likely deliver half the financial support they used to get. And the trade deals, they believe, will sell them down the river. And most of all, the PM's very dismissive indifference of their anger and despair at the pig cull. And according to Shane Brennan of the Cold Chill Federation, Brexiteers seem to think that getting Brexit done has revealed that the Prime Minister of any other obligations to voters in perpetuity. For men like Bill Cash, Steve Baker, I always get them mixed up, Steve Baker, Andrew Bigden, etc., all with a very visceral very visceral hatred of Brussels and the EU Commission, getting out was enough. It wasn't a means to an end, but the end itself. However, voters in Wales and Whiteshirts and elsewhere in the Shires are not ideologues, and they will not be so easily satisfied. Now they want to see the real change, and that will not be easy, largely because of the decision to leave the single market and customs union. And we've talked about this, I don't know how many times. You can go back and you can watch video of famously Daniel Hannan, aka the brain of Brexit, when a Remainer said, look, if you vote to leave, it means that we will end up leaving the single market customs union. Daniel Hannan's response was this: a vote for leave does not mean we are going to leave the single market. Indeed, only a fool would talk of leaving the single market. You can see all over the campaign literature, from interviews, from the hustings, the polls, the live debates that they had. They all said it time and time again. The Leave campaign was committed to remaining in the single market and customs union. Thus, I propose this, that any future government could easily bring the UK back into the single market and customs union without a referendum, because that was indeed what was voted for at the 2016 referendum, unless the Brexiteers actually want to put forward that Brexit was indeed about leaving the single market and customs union, in which case they then lied to the British public about what a vote for leave actually meant. And you want a perfect example? What is the only area of this country, by the way, that is not suffering from economic damage, supply chain shortages, loss of business to the EU, no labour shortages? What area of the country could that be? Well, it's Northern Ireland, because currently Northern Ireland is the only piece of the country that is indeed left in the single market and customs union. And a lot of people have said that Frost was desperate, or Frosty the Nomad, as he became known in Brussels, which I think was quite good. That was quite fun. You know, the idea of him for trying to push for Article 16 and trying to get it done was because he didn't want people to see how Northern Ireland was indeed benefiting from remaining in the single market and customs union, because that will then make your Brexit look bad, because now you will always have a section of the country that is again, for all intents and purposes, part of the United Kingdom, but is also part of the single market and customs union, while the vast rest of the country isn't. And we've already seen the differences going on there. Just businesses in the same sector. In the UK, they are absolutely dying, needing staff, needing supplies, supply chain shortages, the problems getting goods over to Europe. They're losing customers, while the exact same business in Northern Ireland is flourishing. They've got full order books. They don't have the supply chain problems that are going on. It's all there, clearly laid out. And as we've already seen, and we'll be getting into it later, Liz Truss has already called on her first meeting to try and trigger Article 16. So I am officially starting the Liz Truss to trigger Article 16 counter. So it's already at 1. So I wonder how many times before Liz Truss ends up leaving that position before she actually triggers Article 16. Or shall we say doesn't? Because if anyone is foolish enough to trigger Article 16, Britain would lose in this trade war that they want to start. Britain would absolutely lose in this trade war. We do not win. We do not win at all. And she's also, by the way, asked for the removal of the European Court of Justice, something which the government previously, only a week ago, had said that they were fine with. Again, something I think that was very, very much part of always very much part of sort of the red line, shall we say, of Frost, which I think might be part of the reason why he left. And again, I think it was very much Brexit-related reasons why he's indeed left. So, the cost of Brexit. The Centre for European Reform, or the CER, a pro-EU think tank based in London with offices in Brussels and Berlin, has been working on a cost of Brexit model, calculating loss of trade, comparing the UK's trade performance with a doppelganger, a control based on a subset of countries selected from 22 advanced economies by an algorithm representing what trade UK would have been without Brexit. This method is credible, and the CER was recently asked by the financial watchdog, the Office of Budget Responsibility, or the ODR, to update the model for the OBR's economic and fiscal outlook for October. The CIA says that UK's goods trade has been reduced by 11 and 16% as a result of exiting the single market and customs union in January of 2021, consistent, of course, with the government's very own estimate that Brexit will reduce the GDP by 4 to 5%, roughly about £100 billion at current prices, by 2023. This comes before the UK has even implemented the full border checks and imports from the EU, which are tend to starting on the 1st of January 2020. So that, once again, ladies and gentlemen, if you've been following this disaster of these border checks that were meant to come in, all our government has done is just kicking the can of these checks down the road, just constantly kicking them down the road. And we are at that stage again, where last October, they were kicked down the road again to January because they said they weren't ready for them. Well, what's changed? What has changed between October and the 1st of January? Absolutely nothing. No extra preparation has been done, no building of this new infrastructure, nothing. So there is going to be absolute chaos at the ports. Just as has there been for this whole year, there have been chaos at the ports. There haven't been, as much, luckily, because that would be really bad. But now you've got these checks, of course, coming in as well. This is going to cause even further problems. This is where everything will start to go horribly, horribly wrong. So, bear in mind that before the pandemic hit, the Bank of England and the CER and the Financial Times estimated that the UK economy was already between at least 1% and 3% smaller as a result of the depression of the sterling and foreign consumption and investment caused by Brexit. Thus, said the CER, Brexit is going to make levelling up even harder. And in general, governments everywhere will leap on any policy that would raise the GDP by 5%. The Tory party are ideologically committed to the opposite. How is this going to help solve Shropshire's problems? And of course, evidence now of going against Brexit. This has actually been fascinating. The last couple of surveys done on how people think Brexit has gone, by the way, shown it hasn't gone very well at all. It's shown that it's gone that people are increasingly turning against Brexit. So, the referendum campaign was fought on both sides using very much misinformation, exaggeration, and emotion, predictions, forecast, and visions for some imagined future. There was very little in the way of facts, and experts were summarily very dismissed. But now there is no need for a crystal ball. Incontrovertible evidence of the negative fact that Brexit is indeed already having an impact on UK businesses and the economy is mounting by the day and will continue to do so for the foreseeable future. Labour shortages as a result of ending freedom of movement are driving up wages and contributing to rising costs, and inflation is well above the 2% target. The Bank of England's November monetary policy report said that CPI inflation is now expected to peak around 5% in April 2022, materially higher than expected in the August report. In fact, exceeding that mid-December, 4 months earlier, prices are now rising at the fastest rate since 2011, prompting the bank to raise interest rates and the cost of borrowing for the first time in 3 years. Next year, a toxic combination of rising prices, higher interest rates, and tax increases with the lower living standards. After 10 years of austerity that cannot be hidden or washed away. It is hard to see any salvation for the Conservative Party next year or any time in the foreseeable future. One begins to wonder if we are not witnessing the beginning of the end of the world's most successful political party. And they are right. The Conservative Party is very, very much in some really dire straits. They've got some very, very big problems to try and sort out that are going to need, well, big solutions. And they can't hand wave this away. They can't throw a bit of money at it because people are going, well, you've thrown a bit of money at it. Why aren't you throwing more money at it? Because that will help you solve the problem even more. You know, one of the things that a lot of commentators and economists are saying about the next general election, one of the big arguments will be about how parties spend money and investment and who can do it better. That, I think, that will be definitely something that we will see probably at the next conservative, the conservative leadership election, but definitely at the next election, probably in 2023 or 2024, depending if we have an early election or not. But of course, if Boris goes, then I don't think they're going to be getting. I don't think we're going to be seeing an early election now, especially with the state that Boris is in. So that's the trouble going on currently in the Tory party. But of course, things are not all as they seem in the Tory party at the moment, because of course, where are we? Here we are. Because of course, Liz Truss, of all people, has now taken over the grand job of trying to negotiate Brexit. How did she end up here, you might ask? Liz Truss, a political nobody, before, shall we say, her dramatic road to Damascus moment, switching from being a Remainer to an ardent now Leaver, and of course, also a writer of a very now infamous book based on the current, shall we say, trajectory of the Conservative Party, aka Britannia Unchained. Liz Truss was a contributor to that book. So, and once again, we've seen her brought into this position because, again, apparently, and again, we've got to use air quotes here for apparently, did such a good job, negotiating, being the International Minister for Trade, that she's now been trusted to use her fantastic negotiating skills to try and solve the problem around Northern Ireland. And of course, that's not going to happen. Liz Truss was not a good Minister for International Trade. All she did in her position was essentially negotiate a couple of rollover deals, which were essentially the countries going, well, tell you what, we'll have a rollover deal until we can organize a full trade deal, which we've all seen are probably going to be a lot worse than those rollover deals that we currently have. Yeah. And of course, I went on and talked at length about how bad the Japan deal was back in the day. And of course, we're now seeing the Australian trade deal. The Australian trade deal is awful. And if you want the TDLR of it, Britain basically rolled over and gave Australia everything it wanted. And one of the things that was an economist we went over just a couple of months ago, asking why on earth was Britain trying to join the Comprehensive Trans-Pacific Partnership, was why on earth all these Pacific countries would change their rules to allow Britain, a country on the other side of the world, to them allow them fairer access and equal access to their markets, like they've done under that under the now CTPPP. That's too many P's. But yeah, that's not going to happen. Trust me, when those negotiations happen, oh my word, that's going to be fun. That's going to be fun, to say the least. But that's why Liz Truss has ended up in this position. Very much the vaunted belief that somehow, in some way, Truss can solve the problem that six of her previous predecessors couldn't solve. So let's dive into this, because not only has she threatened to trigger Article 16, but she has also brought back in, which the government announced last week even, that she would now be pushing for the removal of the European Court of Justice, something that the government indeed dropped last week. So how she expects to use the exact same negotiating position that got Frost nowhere is going to be interesting. But anyway, let's dive into this then, because because this, ladies and gentlemen, could indeed be our next leader of the Conservative Party, and even the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. So this came from the Independent, the title of Liz Truss accused of using Article 16 threat to bolster position with Brexiteers. Liz Truss today was accused of using her new Brexit responsibilities to position herself for a future Tory leadership contest, after she told the European Commission Vice President Markus Sovac in their first phone talks that she was already ready to suspend the UK-EU agreement on the Irish border by invoking Article 16. Opening strong. Opening strong. To some observers, of course, Boris Johnson's appointment of a foreign secretary to lead the Brexit talks is a way to broker a less belligerent approach to Brussels, after David Frost very much repeated threats to suspend the Northern Ireland Protocol and risk a trade war with the EU. She also signed up to the PM's climb down on the European Court of Justice, which is thought to have played a big part in provoking the resignation of a predecessor known in Brussels as Frosty the No Man for his refusal to make concessions. And by the way, in her first recent announcement, she has gone back on that, saying that the European Court of Justice must be out of the deal. But today she sought to try and protect that hardline stance, insisting that the UK position has not changed, telling Mr. Sovac that Britain remains ready to trigger Article 16 if the barriers of flow between goods of Northern Ireland and the British mainland are not eased. The ECG overnight of the protocol had long been an obstacle of argument due to Lord Frost's insistence on the sovereignty grounds that the court's involvement must be entirely removed. But the UK's proposal would allow it to retain the role interpreting EU rules, which continue to operate in the province because of Mr. Johnson's decision to create a customs border in the Irish Sea. Ms. Truss echoed the language used by the UK when announcing the climb down last week, saying that the ECJ must not be the final arbiter of disputes between us. Liberal Democrat and foreign spokesperson Lara Monham accused Ms. Truss, who backed Remain in the 2016 referendum, of trying to use the issue to position herself for a future Tory leadership contest. When this brief was given to the Foreign Secretary, we hoped it was time for a more diplomatic approach, said Ms. Monham. Instead, it's like Frost never left. Triggering Article 16 will only lead to a ruinous trade war, harming British businesses just at the moment when they need support. In reality, it is Truss that cares more about her reputation with the Tory party faithful than she does about what is really in Britain's interest. The Conservative Party leadership contest psychodrama is only just beginning. And I have to say, it is going to be a proper psychodrama when it starts. And it really is going to be a two-horse race. You know, I've said that earlier on. I've said this already on. It's going to be a Truss Sunak race. Not going to be anyone else. It's going to be one of those two. And I think whatever happens in the coming weeks, up until that leadership contest is announced, whatever happens, how these two make their moves, that's who's going to determine who walks away with the crown at the end of the day. In a statement released following today's talks, Ms. Truss said that the UK needs seeking a constructive relationship with the EU, underpinned by trade and our shared belief in freedom and democracy, adding, resolving the current issue is critical to unleashing that potential. She added, "The UK position has not changed. We need goods flow to flow freely between Great Britain and Northern Ireland and end the role of the ECG as the final arbiter of disputes between us and resolve other issues. We must pick up the pace of the talks in the new year. Our preference remains to reach an agreed solution. If this does not happen, we remain prepared to trigger Article 16, the safeguard, to deal with the very real problems facing Northern Ireland and protect the Belfast/Good Friday Agreement in all its dimensions." Really interesting, because triggering Article 16 would indeed end the Good Friday Agreement. That's pretty much what it would indeed do. In fact, yeah, Gadget brings up a very good point here. Because the ECJ is still involved very much in the area when it comes to Northern Ireland, that means that a lot of European law still would apply to them, meaning that if there was, shall we say, let's say the government did decide to take away some workers' rights or lower some regulations, they wouldn't be lowered, shall we say, in Northern Ireland, which would ask the serious question of, well, hold on, how come workers in Northern Ireland have more rights than they do on the British mainland? Again, an interesting question that, quite frankly, the Tories do not want to have. So hence one reason why they might be indeed be desperate to get the ECG out of Northern Ireland. So in his own statement, Mrs. Falmack said he was committed to continue working towards the conclusive understanding with the UK on practical solutions for the Northern Ireland stakeholders. He added, "The EU position is known. Our goal is stability and predictability." So that, ladies and gentlemen, is how that went. That is how that went. This is going to be interesting, to say the least, when this happens, because it's very likely this person will indeed be the next Prime Minister. Very likely. But needs to say, this indeed is going to be, I think, very interesting to watch, and watch what happens in the next couple of weeks and months, as it was said down below, as the psychodrama of the eventual Conservative Party leadership does roll out. You've got to watch Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak, because their performance and what they do over the next couple of months will determine who comes out on top, who wins the crown, who gets to take that shot at the title and comes out on top. And undoubtedly, it's going to be one of these two. Unless something drastically happens, unless Liz completely mucks up these negotiations and makes herself look completely inept, which is very, very likely to happen. Very likely to happen. Like I say, she's still following the same stance as Frosty the No Man. So what changes? How does this solve the Brexit Northern Ireland issue? It doesn't. And of course, Rishi Sunak, all depends on how well his financial package goes over for the hospitality industry. It also depends on how the next couple of weeks roll out for the economy, how he deals with that. And if we do end up going into yet another lockdown, does he release more furlough money? And again, how does he end up paying for that? Again, these are all possible scenarios that could indeed happen. But if they do happen, could indeed, should we say, very much hamper the leadership ambitions of both Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak. And trust me, there are a lot of Conservatives very much with fingers crossed out there, desperately praying that these two options happen, because obviously also in the wings as well, you've got potential Priti Patel out there. Dominic Raab is in the running as well. Michael Gove almost certainly being thrown around. What's his name? The business secretary, Naheem Zareed, I think his name is. I can't remember it at the top of my head. Matt Hancock as well suspected apparently he might be even throwing himself into the ring. You're betting on Steve Barker. No, Steve would never throw his hat into the ring. Steve is a guy who very much likes to be in the position where he is at the moment. He has far more power, leading his groups of the ERG and the other groups that he's variously involved with. He's far too much power in those. He gets pretty much to dictate who is the leader, and gets now to dictate, well, what that leader does in the direction of the party without even being elected the leader. If he is the leader, well, someone might come after him and might start questioning him, and you can't have that. He's far more comfortable, of course, sitting in the seat that he is indeed in. So indeed, we'll have to see what happens on that front, but could be very, very interesting. Mogadonnan. No, again, Jacob Rees-Mogg is exactly the same. He has said, obviously, in the past that he would like, obviously, to be the leader, but currently at the moment, he has shown no inclinations for actually wanting to be the leader of the Conservative Party. So that ain't happening anytime soon. But of course, I said that we're going to be talking about more, of course, problems in the Conservative Party and problems that they are going to have to face. Because, as we talked about earlier on, there is the potential, what we talked about before, the orange tide. This is, of course, again, a shall we say, Brexiteer HQ nightmare of what they call the double collapse, where essentially the Lib Dems managed to take some very safe seats from them. Indeed, as the studies have shown, if the Lib Dems do replicate what they've done in the, not only North Shropshire, but the Cheshire and Amersham, they could indeed take 57 seats. 57 seats from the Conservatives in their own heartlands, and thus collapse the blue wall. Not only that, there is obviously the other thing as well that we've talked about before, that the red wall could indeed be rebuilt by Labour, because, again, the animosity against the Tories really hasn't gone away. And the fact that Boris Johnson was the Prime Minister gave a lot of people very much the confidence to, shall we say, hold their noses and vote for the Conservatives, probably for the first time in their lives. But that's essentially what could happen. That's the Tory nightmare. Both walls collapse on them. And if that does happen, then the Conservatives go from being the biggest party in the Parliament to third. That's the kind of collapse we are talking about. That is the nightmare scenario in Tory HQ. It's going to be an interesting couple of years, almost certainly, for British politics. But then again, they've been nothing but interesting, shall we say, since 2016. Like I say, as one person put it from France very recently, he doesn't need to watch any of his own soap operas. He just watches watches what's going on here. Oh, question here. What do you think if Scotland leaves the UK? What for Labour and the Tories? First of all, if a Scottish referendum happens, I basically say this all the time. If I was Scottish, I wouldn't be voting for it, purely on the simple matters of economic grounds. Not only that, there are lots of unanswered questions that the Scottish nationalists do not like to ask around those economic grounds. And I, in 2016, very much ran this channel on the idea that if you want a referendum and you want to be separate from the EU, then you should be willing to tell the truth to your voting public about what is going to happen. And lots of the Scottish nationalists are not prepared to tell the truth about that. Simple as. So if Scotland doesn't lead the UK, they've got some very, very bad economic times ahead. The SNP is going to implode because, as I've said before, who are all most of their members made up of, and of course their big donors. Who did they use to back? The Conservatives. Why on earth would these Conservative donors start backing what people often say is meant to be a very liberal and progressive party? Doesn't make a lot of sense in the grand scheme of things. And like I say, Scotland's going to have its own troubles. But if it does leave, of course, the UK, nothing really changes with the ideas. Yeah, there's seats lost ultimately, obviously from them leaving, but ultimately at the end of the day, it won't really affect things. I think it will basically be looking very bad, of course, a very bad reflection on the party to obviously lose that Scottish referendum vote if it does happen. But again, if you look at the polls, they've never been above 60% in quite some time. Indeed, last poll, I think they'd actually dropped down to like 40%. So again, this idea that there is a constant stream and in favour of independence in Scotland is not necessarily true. Very often, and it's just a lot of people just feel that the SNP are the only legitimate vote that they have, which is again a very poor reflection, shall we say, on Scottish Labour. But again, that's Scottish Labour's deal to try and sort that out. Like I say, I'm not a Scottish Labour Party member. I'm a UK Party member, so not my job to sort out. But again, I would obviously advocate if I was in Scotland, I'd be advocating far more for Labour than I would be for the SNP. But that's another conversation for another time. We're getting mad off topic there. But anyway, hope that's answered your question. So let's get into this then. So this is obviously part of potential of the nightmare scenario. Because if this happens, this could, like I say, put the Conservatives from being the strongest party in the UK into a position of being third. And it gets even worse if an electoral pact comes into it. Could be very interesting. So, guess who's back? Back again. 6 months after their very much surprise victory in Cheshire and Amersham, the Liberal Democrats have delivered yet another seismic by-election win, taking a very deep rural seat in North Shropshire with a whopping 34-point swing. This is an epic turnaround for the party, which started in third place in a seat which has returned Conservative MPs in every election but once since the repeal of the Corn Laws. The swing against the Conservatives was the largest since Douglas Carswell's post-defection win as a UKIP candidate in Clacton 7 years ago, and the largest blue to yellow shift since Christchurch back in 1993. And the seventh largest by-election swing in history was not the Christmas present a beleaguered Prime Minister wanted. The North Shropshire earthquake caps a very remarkable turnaround for the Liberal Democrats after nearly a decade in electoral purgatory. Coalition from 2010 was very toxic for the party, and Brexit hampered their recovery, with their enhanced appeal to Remainers offset by the unselfish hostility from Leave voters. The massive swing in both Leave voting Shropshire and Remain voting Cheshire and Amersham suggests the party may at last have shrugged off the baggage of the coalition and Brexit, and become once again a very catch-all vehicle for voter discontent, able to ride local resentments to victory in a very wildly varying political context. The resolution of Liberal Democrats as an electoral gadfly is a major headache for the Tories. The incumbent governments build up grievances over time, whatever they do, and it will have displeased someone. This is particularly true for the demographically diverse and ideologically incoherent current Conservative administration. Ed Daly's party are already the main local competition for many government's MPs, who now could at least console themselves with the notion that Brexit had put sharp limits on their opponent's support. Leave voters would never back a party of ultra-Remain. Now they face the prospects of opponents who, as in the 1990s, can successfully play whatever local tune voters want to hear. Suburban Tories in seats like Cheshire and Amersham will have their opposition to planning reform and tax rises reflected back at them on the doorsteps by activists in yellow rosettes, while rural voters get leaflets on the Conservatives' failure to support farmers. Tory voters looking for obviously levelling up in poorer seats will hear how the government has spent too little, while the small state Conservatives in wealthy seats will hear that it has spent too much. One nightmare scenario for the Tory strategists is having to fight the Liberal Democrats on two large fronts simultaneously. The third party has been moribund since its post-coalition collapse in many traditional strongholds, places which have often seen very liberal roots stretching back centuries or more. Through North Shropshire is no more part of its lost liberal heartland, places such as Cornwall, which went entirely gold to blue to back between 2005 and 2015, or even Somerset, where the Lib Dems still had local opposition in all 4 seats. They lost all at the end of the coalition. This could be very much ripe for revival. The Liberal restoration of these far-flung, rural, often Leave voting areas could come at the same time as a Conservative to Lib Dem realignment in a very different swathe of England. The wealthy, strong, Remain-leaning home county seats, where the third party surged into contention back in 2019. Those two battlegrounds are geographically and politically distinct, which creates major strategic problems for Conservative HQ, trying to decide how to distribute local campaign resources and try and calibrate national messaging. A government already facing a difficult task of defending former Labour heartland seats with the north of the Watford Gap may also now face a very taxing game with the Lib Dems whack-a-mole in a wide range of blue seats now further south. Success here poses new strategic problems for the Lib Dems too. A smaller party with very limited resources can throw everything at a by-election campaign in a single seat, but it has to pick fights carefully in the general election. The Lib Dems simply do not have the money or the activists for an intensive campaigns everywhere. Yet activists are now clamouring for the opportunity to restore the party in its lost heartlands, a call which will only get louder if the party again makes big gains in its territories at next year's local elections. And that is going to be very important again, by the way. We've already seen the swathes of this that this could bring. It could be huge. Either way that this happens, this could be very, very big if the Lib Dems do come back, because these will be denying again a lot of Tories, a lot of seats that again they could very much need. It could indeed lead to possibly another coalition. It's very interesting to see how it will happen, needless to say. So, yeah, twice in the past decade, both in 2010 and 2019, the Lib Dems have been badly burned with the overexercised response to polling a surge led to them by stretching resources too thinly. The risk of squandering this newfound electoral advantage on dozens of second-place finishers is very real. If local and by-election advances do continue, though, the party will face some very tough choices in deciding which seat to target at the next general election, which is why, I'm very all for an electoral pact. It would be very advantageous to the Lib Dems. It would be very advantageous to Labour. And I think an electoral coalition could indeed work. It would wipe out the Tories. But of course, this sparks a huge conversation, because you've got to think about where do these parties come in? How do they effective? What policies are they going to support? What policies are they going to drop? You don't know. You really don't know. But it could be everywhere in between for an electoral pact. Like I say, you've got to sort one out first. And at the moment, the Lib Dems have said they are very much in favour of creating an electoral pact. However, Labour has currently ruled this out. I think North Shropshire should have been very much a wake-up call for them, that this could be very electoral prosperous for them, because, again, they should be focusing, of course, on getting back the red wall seats, which is very easily doable for them. The Tories are going to have a very, very hard time trying to maintain those seats in the future. The resentment of the Tory party is still a very real thing, despite, again, them winning in many of the form of those red wall seats. It still says a lot of them that we are still referring to them as red wall seats after all this time. So, while the government defeat is always a happy result, obviously, for the opposition, Labour strategists will also be wondering about the broader implications of the Lib Dems revival. Keir Starmer's team will be delighted if the return of the vigorous competition drives Conservative resources to seats that Labour's have no chance of winning. But not all seats can be so neatly divided. North Shropshire itself is an example. Labour started in second place, but now have been shoved into the margins. Should Labour candidates, who often start in second place in a pre-coalition Lib Dem seats, accept a Lib Dem restoration or contest it? Even if Labour decide to aid the Lib Dems in the fight back, it is not obvious how best to do this. Again, as I've just been saying, the signals of alignment may help encourage the tactical Labour to Lib Dem switching, but this may impede the Lib Dem recruitment of disgruntled Conservatives. And this obviously association in, of course, a national progressive alliance could very much kill off a very nascent Liberal Democrat revival in deeper blue areas. Both parties might be better served fighting the next general election as frenemies, formally opposing but informally coordinating. This could help preserve the fragile recovery of the Liberal Democrats' greatest electoral source, being none of the above. That is probably ultimately true, how that is potentially going to happen. And again, it's something we're going to have to watch over the time. Like I say, the next big test is obviously the May local by-election, not by-elections, the May local elections. That's the big next electoral test. Will Boris Johnson be the Prime Minister, obviously, by May? Who knows? May very well be indeed be the time that the Conservatives just get so upset with their with Boris over the possible maybe kicking they got in that local elections, they may think, well, it's time to get rid. But again, who knows what could happen in the next in the next months. Boris may decide to go on his own rather than be pushed. The ERG may go for a coup. Liz Truss may somehow manage to convince the EU to lose the European Court of Justice. Again, highly doubt it. Rishi Sunak may somehow pull off an economic miracle, but again, I somehow doubt it. But as I've said continuously, if you want to know who is probably going to be the next Prime Minister of the UK, it's probably either going to be Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak, purely for the simple fact they are the most popular members of the Conservative Party and the non-Conservative Party by a country mile. It is a two-horse race, and unless something drastic happens to either of these two, whether they get caught up in a massive sleaze scandal or Liz Truss can't pull off the victories that she wants in the Northern Ireland talks, or Rishi Sunak screws up the economy in fantastic ways, then at the moment, unless that one of those two things happens, it is very much a two-horse race. Because unless one of those two people goes, Michael Gove ain't getting a shot, Priti Patel ain't getting a shot, Matt Hancock ain't getting a shot. I've just seen someone say Jeremy Hunt is apparently being selected. Again, none of those people are going to get a single look in so long as Truss and Sunak are at the top of the poll, ready to pull Johnson down. And I've got a video coming out tomorrow all about what a very naughty boy Rishi Sunak has been up to that has definitely put him on Santa's naughty list. So that's coming out tomorrow. So be around and ready to watch that. But yes, thank you very much for your watching today. It's been an absolute pleasure as always. Obviously, Saturday is Christmas, so happy Christmas to you all. I don't know if I'm going to do a good morning walk on Christmas Day. I did one last year on Boxing Day, but it was Boxing Day, so I think I might leave it maybe this weekend for the good morning walk, and maybe pick up again after. Who knows? Maybe I'll do a Sunday one instead. I don't know. Or I might even do a Christmas good morning walk. I don't know. I'll have to wait and see. I'll have to see how I feel. But regardless of whatever happens, I want to wish you all a very, very Merry Christmas. As Colin has just done there. Thank you very, very much, Colin. Merry Christmas to you, and Merry Christmas to you all this year. I will see you obviously probably at some point before the new year. But nevertheless, have a Merry Christmas. Please do be safe out there this year. Obviously, the pandemic's still going on. Please, do be careful. Go out, get your boosters. If you haven't yet booked your booster, go off to the. If you've got a centre, you can get jabbed very, very quickly. They've got walking capacity for days of some of these centres. Of course, it obviously depends whether you're a city or a town. So I can't guarantee 100% how quickly you'll be seen. But needless to say, go out, get your booster, remember to wear your masks. And if you do go, plan to go and see people, do remember to at least take a test before you go, just to make sure, even if you have had your third booster. So with all that said, thank you very much for watching this evening. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button on your way out. Like I say, that does help out the channel a lot. And like I say, thank you very much to all the people who do support the channel through Patreon or supporting me by buying me coffee every so often. Again, the links are down below. And of course, the people who are the YouTube membership subscribers as well. Thank you very much to all those people who do support the channel that way. So, as always, I'll be wishing you a very, very Merry Christmas. And hopefully we'll be seeing you all very much in the near future. So, with that said, have a Merry Christmas, everyone, and we'll see you all very soon.